I did not like my degree in general, but I stuck with it because engineering teaches you something very valuable, and it's a very analytical mindset that's solution oriented. Incubators are a long-term program that often include a variety of benefits to a startup. It's often for earlier stage that will help you develop your idea into a working functional business that can go to market. If you have the time and if you're young and you don't have a family, you don't have kids to feed,
Yes, yes,
schools to put kids through, it's fine.
definitely.
The job will pay you to sustain a very good lifestyle, and maybe you can take risks when you have the
Yeah.
time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode from Careers Talks, where I chat with professionals about their daily job responsibilities, their career paths, and how they manage to land their jobs. In this episode, I have my friend Adnan. We studied together at NYU Abu Dhabi. Adnan studied civil engineering. He did a management consulting internship. And then he managed to land a graduate job at StartAD, which is an incubator or a startup hub in the UAE. And now Adnan works as an innovation program lead at StartAD. So today we're going to talk about Adnan's career, why he studied civil engineering, then shifted to a completely different industry or field. What does he do now? And we're going to touch a bit as well on the startup scene in the UAE. Adnan, first of all, how are you doing today? How's the
I'm
weekend
good.
been so far?
Thank you, Tim. It's been good. It's good to see you as well. And thank you for having me on your podcast. I think what you're doing is great. And I think it adds immense value for graduating students, undergrad students looking to find their jobs, their passion, their industries. So thank you.
Of course, and I think we're going to touch on an interesting industry that I've never really touched on in a good level of detail today,
Mhm.
which is more of like the startup scene and someone working with closely with startup
Mhm.
founders, helping them to grow. So I'm sure there's a lot of insights we can share with the audience today. I always start my episodes with the guest's career path and how they
Mhm.
shifted from what they studied in uni to what they do now. So
Mhm.
can you walk us a bit through your decision of you started studying civil engineering, but now you work
Mhm.
as an innovations program lead where you work with startups. So can you walk me a bit through that decision and why you made that shift?
Of course. So I'll be completely honest with you. I went into civil engineering, wanting to study civil engineering, really in the blind, not knowing what it entails and what the degree is like. And I was under the impression that civil engineering closely resembles architecture because I
Hmm.
like design and I thought I'd be going into a similar industry, but I was completely wrong.
Hmm.
Uh, I did not like my degree in general, but I stuck with it because engineering teaches you something very valuable, and it's a very analytical mindset that's
Hmm.
solution oriented. You're always looking for solutions to problems, and that was valuable. And I saw that that was valuable during the internships I did in consulting. What you'll often find, and it's very interesting, is that when you're looking at a job in consulting, the preferred degrees, they'll tell you engineering is one of them.
True.
And that's because they know engineers are analytical. They have the mindset that would help them succeed in an industry like that one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
No.
was, yeah.
No. Go
So
ahead.
that
Sorry.
was, yeah. Sorry for interrupting. Yeah. So yeah, that was purely why I stuck with the degree. But since I didn't like it that much, I tried early on in my undergraduate, let's say, journey to try to venture outside of engineering, see what other paths I can take, what other industries I like in general. And it started with a internship in architecture back in my sophomore year. Wanted to see if I actually like architecture and wanted to see if I can fit into the industry having studied civil engineering.
Hmm.
I mean, to say the least, it was a good experience, but it wasn't something that I saw myself doing long term. It was very long hours behind the laptop, no human interaction, just you head down doing a design on CAD or Revit or whatever software it is, and decided, this is not for me.
Fair.
The second attempt at finding something different was investing in cryptocurrencies and financial currencies, the forex
Interesting.
market in general. Yeah.
I
Um,
I remember actually from uni days you were doing that as well.
I was trying to see, different paths and stuff. Yeah, I was doing it third year. Uh, Despite some success, I did not like how obsessive
Mm,
this pathway could be. You're always in front of the charts, always in front of your phone, a lot of anxiety around the money that you're investing.
true.
So decided, maybe this is not for me. Then I saw the opportunity to apply to a consulting job. I didn't know what management consulting looks like. I applied in the blind for an internship,
Mhm.
and to my surprise, I was called in for an interview. And I remember it was a long day of interviews. I was in New York at the time, UAE time, time
Mhm.
difference was quite a challenge. I did a lot of research and saw what the industry is like, and I found it really interesting. I always knew I liked business, but didn't really know at what depths of business I'd like to look at.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a good experience. I landed that internship, very interesting projects, one in transportation and one in logistics. Uh, but what I didn't enjoy is the very long hours.
Yeah.
I mean, even as an intern, you wake up at 7 a.m., go to bed at 2 a.m. That was pretty standard.
Well, okay.
And I do care about my work-life balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last attempt was a startup, a gaming startup, if you remember, with a friend of
Mhm.
mine.
Yes.
It's called Plexo Gaming. Yeah. It was an esports platform that allows gamers to monetize their passion.
Mhm.
This is a very under-tapped market in the MENA region. It's very developed in the US and Europe,
Mhm.
not much in MENA, even though we do have a very good population of professional gamers or gamers with immense potential. The startup operated for 5 years. We saw some success, and I joined StartAD for one of their incubation programs, and that was my first ever interaction with the
Okay.
industry I'm in at the moment. Yes, so I joined
Nice.
it as a founder. It was extremely valuable. I learned a lot. The pathway in an incubator program grows your network immensely.
Mhm.
Grows it from the perspective of meeting other founders, meeting other trainers and experts. So it was great. I really, really enjoyed it. And so when it came time to graduate, you know how NYU Abu Dhabi has PPTP,
Yes.
post-graduation professional training program, which is basically a short-term internship with any department within the university as a way to transition from graduation to industry.
Mhm.
So I decided to do it with StartAD. It was 2 months. It was really intense, actually. I remember 7 p.m., 8 p.m. I'd log off, but it was extremely enjoyable. I was staffed
Nice.
on two accelerator programs, one for global startups in construction and one for commercializing research for NYU AD professors.
Mhm.
Extremely fun experience. I really enjoyed it. And I was lucky enough to get a return offer from
Nice.
StartAD to join them. Started my career as a coordinator, moved up to an innovation programs lead a year and a half later.
Nice. I think a consistent theme that I've seen with people who did these pivots in their careers, whether it's like from studies to doing or starting a grad job that's not related to their degree, is that you've really tried a lot before graduating, so you know what you really like and what you don't. So yeah, I think this is a great tip that I've always like insist on highlighting in the
Yeah,
podcast, which is try as much as you can before graduating so that you know as like what's your personality when it comes to corporate culture or other industry like other fields, other industries, as it really helps make that decision once you graduate, because it's not an easy decision. So very
it's very true.
interesting and diverse journey pre graduating and landing
Yeah.
that graduate job. I'd like to maybe ask you a bit more about what does it mean,
Hmm.
or what's the value that an incubator adds to a
Hmm.
startup. So why would a startup go to an incubator, and what's
Yeah,
the benefit for the incubator as well? Like if you can touch a bit on that dynamic between both parties
sure.
involved, let's say.
Of course. And what I can do is give you a holistic understanding of the industry because
Yes.
being a professional within the industry, I see the terms used loosely, and sometimes there's confusion of what an accelerator is, what an incubator is,
Yes.
what a venture builder is. But generally, um, these entities, whether it's an accelerator, incubator, venture builder, or VC, they're there to support a startup to some extent in the different life cycle of a startup. Meaning, if you look at incubators purely, incubators are a long-term program that often include a variety of benefits to a startup. It's often for earlier stage that will help you develop your idea into a working functional business that can go to market. And some of the benefits you will gain is, of course, the training and mentorship, but then there's also office spaces, there's access to networks and mentors, and it's generally a long-term commitment. A lot of incubators might take a fee for you to join, or might be free of charge, depending on who's sponsoring the incubator. But very rarely have I seen, or very rarely would it be an incubator purely for equity. Equity more comes from accelerator programs.
Okay.
Or it comes when an incubator also has a VC fund on the side. That's quite common. That's very common, where an incubator and accelerator will have a VC fund as well, because it's an excellent pipeline of startups that you're already working with, you're already supporting. So you can do your due diligence in parallel to the work you're doing, and then invest in the high potential ones.
Nice.
So for an incubator, I mean, you are gaining access to startups, to cutting edge technologies. And a lot of times they're paying you a fee to join your incubator. You're investing in them at some point. For the startup, and especially if you're someone that doesn't have the background of entrepreneurship, business, or economics, it's an excellent way to learn these skill sets. I mean, truly, incubators can really take your idea into a functional business when a lot of the times you have no idea how to start. What's the roadmap like? It can feel often overwhelming when you start thinking about all the different pieces of starting a business or having a startup. And it'll really help you nail it down.
In terms of like, in general, because we're going to touch on StartAD specifically, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like some filtering process where an incubator makes before choosing these startups. And from what you're saying, these are founders with sometimes just an idea. So still no operations, no team built, nothing. How does that process come into play? As in, you just have a person coming with an idea, and there's a lot of similar founders with just an idea. So how do you identify the high potential ones that you invite them to your program, given that there's no solid financials to look at or any performance indicators? So how does that process come to play?
I mean, a very good question, Tamer. For early stage, it's always tricky because, like you said, there's no indicators or metrics that you can study to see the potential of a business. I think one entity that's a very good example of doing this right is Antler. So Antler is a traditional VC with incubation and acceleration programs that funnel into the VC. And what they call themselves is your day zero founders and investors. Because what they do is they focus on the founder, not the idea and not the startup.
Nice.
So because you can't judge a startup in those early days, what you can do is assess the quality of the founder themselves, the person that's applying with an idea, assessing their ambition, their drive, what they want out of entrepreneurship. And then they invite them into their incubation program where they meet like-minded people. And what Antler does is it connects you to other founders that can share the similar idea, have you form a team, and from there you take it forward into building a startup.
Nice. So you're betting on the people more, which honestly makes sense, because as an incubator, you have the industry knowledge, the connections, the network. So as long as you also match this with the right founder, then you probably have, I don't know, 60, 70%, let's say, covered. But then you definitely need to progress to building the team, the operations, etc. So yeah, that's interesting to know. When it comes to, maybe we can now narrow the focus to where you work in StartAD. Can you tell us a bit more about what are the different channels they work in, what's their goal, and a bit on the startups they work with, the industries, the different industries you aim like to get startups work in, basically?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll track back to me discussing the industry. So incubators are one part of it. The other part is accelerator programs, which are often short-term commitments for later stage startups that in return, the accelerator takes equity that will give you something more in return. A lot of the accelerators will often put you right there in front of investors or put you right there in front of your first or second client. And there's immense value in what an accelerator does. The third type is a venture builder, which will have an in-house team of maybe entrepreneurs that will help you build your idea ground up, including the tech suite. So they will support you in building the technology that you have in mind.
You said including the tech stack.
Yeah, the tech stack,
Okay.
all of it. So they'll have in-house coders, developers that will help you build that solution.
Okay.
And then, interestingly, in recent years, there's been a transition for a lot of these entities to become service providers. So think of it as implementation consultants that are contracted by government and corporate entities to run their programs for them. And it's a form of external innovation that's been recently coming up, where corporates will have their own acceleration program to funnel new technologies into the business, or governments looking to innovate in a specific sector. They want global solutions to come to a region or to benefit whatever industry that the government is looking at.
Interesting.
It's been very new, and it's become a very major business model. And if we talk about StartAD, we cover that suite of incubation, acceleration, youth programming, from idea stage all the way to Series B growth startups. But we do it as a service provider. So they're not programs. We're contracted by corporates and governments to run these programs for them.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So to recap, there's incubators, accelerators, venture builders. And StartAD covers all three, we said, or is it just the incubation and acceleration?
We used to cover venture building as well. We have a hardware prototype lab. The background behind me is the lab that we have, where we actually helped a few startups build their technology ground up. But in recent years, we've slowly shut down the level of operation because we're focusing on the business model that currently works, which is acceleration incubation for government and corporate entities.
As a service, basically.
Exactly, because we're not an entity that can take equity in businesses. The way venture builders make money is they gain an equity stake in the startups they're supporting. And at some point, once the startup is big enough, you sell your equity stake for money. We don't do that. So venture building is not a revenue generating pillar for us.
Okay. No, that makes sense. We've touched on incubators, accelerators, and venture builders. How do these three, or like where does VC sit in this? I know it's completely different. So can you touch a bit on how's the VC different from these three modes of startup building?
So very good question, Ahmed. So the main difference is that venture capital is your investor. It's the people that are risking their money for an equity in your business to see a return at some point. Accelerators, incubators, venture builders, they're more programming. So they run a program for you to teach you, upskill you, gain a very small stake in your business, or you pay a small fee, and that's it. So your Y Combinators are going to support you at some point. VC is an investment arm. It's more of financials. It's more of a return on investment type of entity. But what's common is a lot of incubators, accelerators, or venture builders will have a VC arm that wants to invest in startups. But they never, let's say, integrate. You'll never have an incubation team that's also a VC team. Because the skill sets in those types of industries are very different, right?
Okay.
So what will often happen is that there's an independent department that's a VC department and an independent department that looks at the accelerator incubator program.
Yes, nice. I think I know that StartAD runs numerous programs, so probably it will be tough to touch on all of them. But can you give us an example of like the most popular one that people in the UAE apply to? What does it do? And maybe what outcomes have you seen from such, from that program, basically?
Of course. I'll tell you about my favorite one, and the one that I think has the most impact. It's something we call a corporate sprint accelerator.
Corporate sprint accelerator.
Accelerator. So the idea behind it is to help corporates in the UAE gain access to cutting edge technologies through startups. Okay. In the early days, a lot of global startups would find interest in the region, but corporates were very early and not very ready to innovate. So oftentimes we would run these programs with no clear outcomes or very minimal outcomes, right? We want to facilitate an introduction between a corporate and a startup to hopefully find a commercial deal between them where the startup can implement its technology in the suite of a corporate solutions and eventually maybe set up shop in the UAE. But that was very difficult early on. But very quickly, the market in the UAE gained a lot of maybe, let's say, traction and developed immensely when it comes to innovation. And a lot of these corporates actually started building their own innovation departments. And they had this mandate to start to look at new technologies, start to innovate, start to follow the visions that the UAE government issues, like maybe Vision 2050, which is net zero emissions.
Yes.
And that's when, the program picked up and the impact picked up. So a notable example is the 7th edition of the Corporate Sprint Accelerator. It's focused on construction. So we sourced 10 global startups through an application process. So we get around 250 applications, we interview 30, and then we select 10 startups to go through a 5-week program. And the program is purely a matchmaking process where we have the startups meet these construction companies and try to find synergies.
Interesting.
And what I mean by synergies is the construction company will start identifying its pain points, saying, for example, we hate how concrete takes 30 days to settle. We have to pause all our construction process because we need to wait for concrete to reach a certain strength. A startup had a solution. It put a sensor in the concrete that can tell you well in advance that the concrete reaches a specific strength and you can continue building.
Oh, wow, nice.
Wait that time frame because research shows that, concrete takes this amount of time to settle. But with that sensor, maybe on the 14th day, the concrete has reached enough strength for you to start continuing your construction.
Interesting.
That was the type of matchmaking we were doing. It's very interesting to see the type of problems that these corporates face and how we solve them. And the program resulted in 14 pilot projects. Pilot projects are basically small commercial deals on a very small scale, where a corporate will implement the technology in one small project to test how. That's what a pilot means. And proof of concept. So concept is basically a startup co-developing its solution with a corporate entity to prove that this technology works.
Nice. And to touch a bit on the role of StartAD in this interaction, let's call it, do you look at operations of both and make sure that they come together coherently once you make the match? Or so what's your contribution to this match or to this interaction between the startup and the company, basically?
Yeah, so we're the middleman. We're the glue between the startups and the corporates. So what we do is we work with the corporate to identify the problems. So we do design thinking workshops. We try to identify challenge statements, we call them, which is essentially just a problem statement of a specific problem a corporate is facing. And then what we do is we take this information and we scout for global startups that solve these problems.
Interesting.
Again, these applications, we interview, we select the 10, we put them through a program. And the program has components of training and mentorship. So we train these startups to understand the UAE market because they're global. We tell them what it takes to succeed in the UAE. And at the same time, we mediate these meetings between the corporates and the startups because we want to make sure that it's flowing in the right direction, because it can be very distracting or it can be very ambitious in the things they want to achieve because it's often an exciting end, right? The corporate can see a lot of very good solutions that they quickly want to use and integrate because it gives them a competitive advantage. Oftentimes they fail to realize that some of these solutions are too early for them to adopt or the market is not ready for it yet. So we play that
assessment. Okay.
Exactly. And we support in the pilot rollout as well, because oftentimes what we've seen is corporates would treat startups as big companies when they're not. When you come to maybe sign a legal commercial deal, there's a clause that says, you should have $2 million in insurance should anything go wrong. But then $2 million for a startup is a lot of money you probably cannot afford. And a lot of pilot projects would fall through the cracks because of such terms and conditions.
Okay.
What you essentially do is try to help the corporate come up with startup-friendly processes.
Nice.
Instead of payment terms of 40 days, you give payment terms of 15 days for a startup so they can receive their funds earlier. And you give them shortened, much more startup-friendly legal contracts that they can handle and not burden them in the process.
Nice. And I'm assuming there's like a dedicated team in that corporate company that is put on that project, but you also have certain members from that startups working. So do you also do meetings where you have these people like the startup, and then because like how do you make sure that also culturally they're fit as like in terms of what the startup does and what the company does, and how the two different teams work basically? Do you also oversee that process?
Very good question. So what we do is we give the corporate the opportunity to select the startups to begin with, so that there's a vetting process early on. We work, a lot of these corporates already have innovation departments. So the teams that are dedicated to run these or to be staffed on these programs have an understanding of what it takes to innovate.
Okay.
They're trying
in the
to build
corporate side, you mean?
The corporate side.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And they're looking to build that culture throughout the corporation as well. So what we urge them to do sometimes is nominate employees in completely different departments to come and join the program just to gain that entrepreneurial mindset. And because they are the people facing these problems. If you bring me a site engineer to talk to a startup that solves problems in construction, he'd know better about the implementation of such a technology. And on the flip side, that person would gain that exposure to what innovation looks like and what entrepreneurship looks like.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think maybe we can also a bit now know more about your specific role, job responsibilities. So maybe can you walk us through your involvement in these programs as an innovations program lead? And what do you do? What value do you add in your role to these programs?
Yeah. So essentially, you can think of me as the project manager. So we do the end-to-end execution of such project, from developing the proposal to closing the commercial deal between a corporate and a startup. So a lot of project management skills are required. That includes being organized, communicating very well, documentation, the whole suite of project management. And on the flip side, you need to be highly analytical and you need to try to solve a lot of problems because a lot will come up as you progress.
I'm assuming yes.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there's so much that happens, especially how delicate certain industries can be, like healthcare, right?
Yes.
You have to go through so many approvals before your technologies can be implemented. And then I have my own internal team that I manage, and it's a combination of members from StartAD and then external people that work with, such as trainers, experts, maybe mentors or marketing agencies and so on. And the best part of my role is that I get to mentor startups as well.
Nice.
A lot of these programs, I can sit as a mentor, maybe coach, select few of these startups and work with them to make sure that, you know, what we're doing on the program is actually reflecting towards their ambitions and their goals for the UAE market. And I often find that the best part, because you really see great impact and you really see how your work can actually create immense benefit for both the startup itself and the UAE market. Once you go on the news and you read that this technology has been implemented and these are the outcomes, you feel actually proud of what you have accomplished in that process of, making a program happen.
It's interesting that you're close to many processes, like from the startup side, but also internally, and you need to oversee all of them, make sure all these processes are coherent, because at the end of the goal, like at the end of the day, your goal is to fuel the growth for the startup, but make sure that this corporate firm is getting the return. At the same time, your clients or the people who basically came and told you, can you please run this program for me, are also satisfied with the outcome. So I'm assuming that
very well said.
If we want to look at a week in the life of your job, it's going to be like there's no fixed schedule. I'm assuming like
every
one
day
day is
this
startup founder has this issue, but then the other day is I need to update our client on what's happening. But can you maybe break it down into like the key themes, key tasks that you might that you will do or you usually
Yeah.
do?
So it's the cycle is pretty standard where once you win a proposal, there's a phase of planning the program with the client and understanding their objectives and goals. So there's a lot of client management.
Yes.
And a lot of implementation work to the conception of the innovation strategy that you've developed for them. So a lot of the times the client is looking from you to gain insights into what they should do when it comes to that specific program. What innovation outcomes should they expect? And then there's a phase where you're scouting for startups. So it's a full-fledged marketing campaign with paid social media ads, offline partners that are scouting for you. You're traveling at road shows. You're going to tech conferences and looking and talking to startups, trying to find them. And some programs can go up to 400, 500 applications, and it's a very long process having to sift through all of them and then interview these startups. There's that phase as well, and then there's the program itself where it's events, it's in-person training or online training, it's meetings, it's pitch days, it's conferences, it's exhibiting. So there's a lot of event management as well. And then, of course, there's the closing of these programs that involve reports, that involve you overseeing, that meetings between the client and the corporate and the startup. And then StartAD in itself is also a startup. We're very new. We're 6 years old, 7 years old, still finding our market, still finding our product market fit. So I do a lot of things internally as well, from sifting our data to cleaning up our data to presenting our data, working on our CRM software or implementing new technologies for us that will help improve our processes. It's quite an exciting space. You do a lot.
Yeah.
You learn a lot. But it can get often overwhelming or very tiring.
Yeah, I think reflecting back on the episodes that I had, I think this is one of the most diverse jobs that include multiple tasks to be done, and the type of the tasks are kind of like different, to be honest. So it's very interesting. Even the type of people they work with, because you have an engineer that you're introducing to a founder, but then you have a family office that has this program, wants you to run the program. So it's interesting that you also deal with people from different backgrounds and
different backgrounds. But what I found often important, and I mean, the hard skills are important, what I told you about being a project manager and stuff, but there are soft skills that take you far in life, and it's just being curious and having that affinity to understand new technologies always helps. Very much like consultants, we have to learn an industry on the fly, understand what are the gaps in that industry in order to work in it. For example, we have a new project in healthcare. I've only worked in healthcare a few times. I mean, very quickly I had to learn to understand where healthcare is progressing and what it needs. And the other is resourcefulness. Like, as long as you can find your own solutions to your problems without having to involve too many people, you will progress very fast as well. One, it's going to save you time and effort, and second, it's going to teach you valuable skills as well on the way. So these soft skills are very important, and of course, communication goes a long way.
Nice.
It's very crucial,
I think also what really helped you is starting as a program coordinator and then having the soft launch into fully being that project manager, because it's really tough if they take you from like, okay, now you graduated from uni and you suddenly need to become innovations program lead.
That never happens.
Tough. It's a tough transition.
It's a tough one, of course.
So what do you think contributed the most to that skill shift or that knowledge build up from that role to that role? Is it just like experience, or do you do any courses outside as well? Like, what were the things that you think contributed the most to you being capable of becoming a lead?
Yeah, good question. For the coordinator role, definitely the internships have helped a lot. Definitely working in consulting helped massively because of how fast-paced the industry is, and how it also teaches you to quickly learn different industries, be very strategic in the way that you think. And then when I was a coordinator, I always tried to work outside of my job description as well, because generally I had ambitions to climb the ladder quickly, and I wanted to do more than what's asked of me. There's a downside to it, of course, and it's that will not guarantee your work-life balance. You'll often have extra hours. but I was willing to do it. My
Yeah.
definition of work-life balance had shifted over the years,
Mhm.
but I also did a lot of courses that would help. So I've done
Nice.
innovation management through Coursera with Erasmus University. I did
Nice.
entrepreneurial finance with Duke through Coursera, and I did innovation strategy with Harvard Business School online.
Hmm.
And these definitely helped in the work that I've done at the moment. But as a coordinator, I mean, your main goals and tasks were more admin.
Mm.
You're doing the reports, the slides, you're building the Excel sheets, you're doing the scoring assessment of the startups that you're talking to, but you're never the front-facing person with the client or with the startup, facing person on a program or an event. And you're not managing a team. You're being managed within a team.
Yeah.
But I tried to step out of that role. I tried to maybe be front-facing in a few endeavors, maybe take a few client meetings, and that definitely helped in building a case internally to gain that promotion into the next stage, because I've had already worked outside of that job description.
Yeah. I think it's one of those careers or job fields where there's no concrete way of climbing the ladder or becoming better at it. You choose your own way of learning, which is I think is a bit different, right? From in consulting, like oh, you progress is the usual way. This is what you need to do to become senior consultant, manager, etc. But I guess in your industry, it's a bit like open on what you become good at, and
Exactly.
then yeah, even after a lead, I'm assuming like there's certain things that you become
Mhm.
better at, and there's like no limit to where you can channel your focus in terms of learning skills, etc.
Mhm.
So I find that really interesting that some fields are it's up to you how you grow, and other fields, if you want to climb the ladder, this is
It's
how
very
you
clear.
need to. It's very
Yeah,
structured, clear, and there's no your own way of doing it doesn't really
that's true.
exist basically.
Honestly, it's true across the board when you compare big corporate to startup. I think that's
Ah,
the biggest
yes,
differentiation.
yes.
So in big corporations, your career path is well defined. Before you join, they'll tell you their progression looks like this, and this is the amount of years that it takes, and these are guidelines. When I joined StartAD, I mean, as a startup, I mean, these guidelines are not set in stone. You have to figure it out as you work. And I mean, it's a telltale of startups as well, where you do everything, and at some point you find something you like and you're good at, and then you
Yeah.
progress into it. I mean, you could join a startup as an analyst, and at some point you're the marketing manager.
Hmm.
Could happen. It's completely fine, and it's the exciting dynamic of being in a startup. You
Yeah,
can create your own path.
yeah, I think one advice that I might have here is look at where the gap is in your startup's operations and then look at what you're good at and see how you can find a match where you can focus on bridging that gap and helping your startup you're working at with this problem, but at the same
Mhm.
time you're contributing to your own career growth because you have some
Exactly.
leeway to choose what do you want, and it's an opportunity
Mhm.
for you to like you have multiple gaps, choose whatever you think you will really excel
100%.
at and go for it, learn, do whatever you can to yeah, bridge the gap and learn
100%.
basically and contribute.
Very well
So
said.
yeah,
Very well
yeah.
said, Tamer. Yes. Yeah. I know. I was just gonna say as well. I mean, what we've often seen corporates do at very recently, actually, I mean, maybe in the last decade, is they started mobilizing their own internal startups for new projects that they're undergoing, because there's value in that fast-paced, dynamic environment
True.
where people have the freedom to experiment in different verticals. And so oftentimes you'll see maybe a big F&B or maybe a big FMCG company that's looking to launch a new product would mobilize an internal startup team
Hmm.
that takes care of that maybe new project. And it's just because it works better when you're trying to innovate.
Yeah, I think you always need to, no matter how you grow as a corporate, you need to go back to that boot
Startup.
camp building
Yeah,
mode and try
exactly.
to understand what's happening, etc. Because if you're in that
100%.
mindset of, oh, we've already achieved a lot, we've already reached that level of growth, let's do it our own way, you'll always, there's some details that you're gonna miss if you don't really assess it bottom up as if you're building
Exactly.
something
That's
new.
very
So
true.
that's very interesting
And the
as well.
market will move way faster than you do. And
If
it's a
you
lot
do
of
the
times,
traditional way,
if
yes.
of course, if you do the traditional ways, the market will outgrow you very quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are so many case studies of, I mean, Kodak is a perfect example of a big corporate that refused to innovate, and look what happened. I mean,
Yeah.
very quickly got outperformed by digital cameras. And
Yeah,
so yeah, I mean, there's also immense value in it.
definitely. I agree.
So,
If there's a graduate watching us now, university student,
mhm,
or even a young professional who've went into an industry but they're not very keen, they want to go to the shift to the VC or the
mhm.
startup industry, what are some key skills or steps to take to
Mhm.
make that shift, basically?
Yeah, I mean, for VC, you definitely need a financial background. I mean, in a VC, you're purely looking at due diligence, financial statements, assessing the growth opportunities of a startup. A lot of times, if it's a later stage VC, the financials play a big role. If it's an earlier stage VC, they look at other factors such as
Correct.
the product, the market fit. They look at the team, they look at the idea itself. So I would say, I mean, it's a combination of understanding the financials plus some sort of understanding of the business. But what's nice about this industry is you learn very quickly on the job.
In the
If you
VC
feel like
industry, you mean?
the VC or in
Yeah.
the accelerator, whatever it is, if you feel like you don't have that understanding of a startup or that business acumen, you'll very quickly learn it on the job. There's so many resources online that you can refer to. A lot of courses on Coursera. I mean, Investopedia will teach you the terms. And it's really, I mean, it's not that difficult to break into.
Yeah.
But you will have to have some prerequisites for VC for especially, and that's the financial
Technical.
abilities,
Yeah.
technical expertise. For accelerators, incubators, I mean, you're essentially a project manager. So project management skills will help. Some incubators, accelerators do their own internal programs, such as, for example, Flat 6 Labs or Hub 71. But others will service these programs for corporates. And so
Yes.
they might look at, your communication skills. How do you manage your clients? But entry level, again, I think it's an industry where you can learn on the job very quickly. And as long as you're curious, as long as you're driven and you have that passion for startups, for businesses, you'll very easily, succeed into it. How do you break in? I think your network is very important.
Yes.
Networking is what got me the job, and networking is what will get you something. Maybe, especially in the UAE, at least, I mean, your network will play a big role into breaking into this industry. And yeah, I mean, again, I think, Tamer, I'm pretty sure this was a recurring theme. Your network is everything.
Yes.
And it's what will get you.
I feel it's also very important here, right? Because it's not super structured how job postings are offered in that industry. So maybe, I don't know, someone has an incubator or there's a startup. Like, you don't have to start in an incubator. You can also work in operations in a startup and then go to an incubator. So if that's the case, then definitely networking is really, really key. You never know. You might see a founder posting, oh, we're looking for this and that, or there's an internship position open, which is a bit different than applying to an investment banking job where you need to go to the websites and try to talk to the person in that company. Like, it's more of having an open network,
100%.
being very open and looking, okay, what's happening in the startup ecosystem in the country I'm living in. And yeah, it's a bit of a different approach, I feel.
Exactly.
But yes, networking is a very important one in this.
Accelerators, incubators are quite niche as well. So it's,
Exactly.
I mean, you can oftentimes count the organizations that are available. So
yeah,
I think that network will play a bigger role in you landing a job.
Of course, practical tips are like follow these incubators you have in your university or country or wherever you are on LinkedIn, the founders that they've helped. Any other founder you see interesting in industries in your interest in or the country you're in. So lots of ways to
do it.
To do it.
I mean,
exactly.
Even within the university, if you can start maybe a student interest group or activities that revolve around entrepreneurship, around startups, you'll oftentimes find it's easy to connect with founders that are willing to help and support. It's easy to connect with other incubators, accelerators willing to support. Because I mean, everyone's excited about this industry and everyone's excited to give back. And on the flip side, you'll gain early exposure into this field in general. And perhaps maybe build a reputation within. And what I've seen is a lot of universities have actually started having their own entrepreneurship departments.
Yes.
A lot in the UK, actually. I mean, I know of UCL and Imperial that have entrepreneurship departments that help students innovate, to help professors commercialize their research.
Interesting.
You can always talk to them, see what activities you can do hand in hand, or maybe establish your own within a university as a student. Interesting.
100%.
It happened in
Yeah.
NYU Abu Dhabi.
If I'd go back in time, I'd definitely start a business just for the sake of knowing what it takes and what do I need to do and what's the process, even if it's not what I want to do afterwards.
Mhm.
If you have an incubator program in university, my advice is just go for it, give it a shot.
Go for it. Exactly, 100%.
See, because it can contribute a lot to your learning, your career, your network, etc. I think what I want to know a bit more is your experience in the UAE, specifically in that scene. Like, what's the culture like? Do you think, like, where is it now in terms of growth, that industry? And then we can touch a bit on the pay for a graduate in that industry. But let's start a bit with the culture and the level of growth we've reached, and what do you think are the next steps for the VC scene in the UAE?
For sure. I think, I mean, in my opinion, maybe a bit biased, but I think the UAE is one of the best places you can be as a startup, purely because there's so many resources available for you for support. You have all of it: incubators, you have VCs, you have accelerators, you have venture builders that will help you throughout your life cycle. So it covers it all in the UAE, from idea all the way to going public. We have the NASDAQ in the UAE that will help you go public.
Nice.
So from that front, you're covered. And then second, UAE in general has matured a lot when it comes to innovation. And we're actually seeing a shift in the industry that's becoming more mature of, you know, attracting the global technologies, attracting the global talent, and actually trying to implement it throughout the value chain of an industry. For example, we're looking at healthcare. We're trying to truly innovate in healthcare, where we use the most advanced technologies to solve the most pressing issues. Right? How can we, you know, develop drugs in weeks instead of years using artificial intelligence or using new technologies and new stuff? So it's great to see. I think across industries, everyone's trying to innovate. We closed a program not long ago where we looked at how do we achieve net zero in, you know, property, in prop tech in general.
Nice.
So a property developer looked at solutions that can really reduce emissions and really reduce consumption on our natural resources. So it's great to see. And there's a lot of activity happening. There's a lot of local VCs, family offices, and global VCs available. So it's honestly a great place to be.
Nice. And for someone keen on starting their career in that field in the UAE, first question is, how easy is it? Is there like a lot of roles that you see open, or they usually hire more experienced people?
It's definitely not common to see these roles open.
For graduates.
Again, it's a niche. It's a niche field. It's not as common for, you know, hiring in bulk like consulting or, you know, big tech or big corporates. But with the right network, with the right people, you will find an entry into it.
Is that as a graduate or in general?
In general.
In general.
As a graduate, yeah. I mean, just like any industry, there's a place for everyone. Graduate to experience.
Yes.
That's fine. As a graduate, the openings are not that common, but again, with the right people, you will be able to break into it. And I think a lot of, you know, these industries have an email that you can reach out to, cold email, they'll reply to you, maybe see where it goes. And a lot of them, even if you don't work in them, you can participate in their programs on the flip side and maybe gain that level of experience there that they can support you. Because what's important is, I mean, a lot of programs in the UAE will offer you financial incentives as well. So they'll give you a grant, they will invest in you if the idea or the business is going fine. But from a career standpoint, it's niche and the openings are not that common.
Okay. And in terms of pay, what is it like in that industry in the UAE?
I think it's on the higher end. I mean, as a fresh graduate, you can expect, it's a big range, but you can expect somewhere between maybe 14 to 20,000 dirhams per month as a starting salary.
In dollars or pounds?
In dollars, you're talking about maybe $3,000 to $5,000 a month.
Okay.
That's on the higher side. It's maybe $2,500 to $4,000 a month.
Okay.
Fresh graduate entering this market, untaxed as well in the UAE.
Untaxed, yes.
Tax, yeah.
Makes a big
So
difference.
that's typically the pay. Certain companies pay higher than others, and that depends on their funding structure, where the money's coming
Yes.
from, if they have VC arms, and so on. But it's on the higher end.
Fair, fair. I think last two questions. First one is trends that you see growing, whether in the UAE or globally. Because, like, for example, 2020, we had like a big growth or a big focus on health tech and fintech. But where are we now in terms of key trends that you think are reshaping industries, whether UAE or globally?
Good question. I mean, I know you heard it a lot, but artificial intelligence is one.
Yes, yes.
But we're looking at it across industries, and I think healthcare is still a focus. Healthcare still
Okay.
remains a big trend because with Gen AI and with AI, there's a lot of opportunities to innovate within healthcare,
Healthcare, yes.
and there's a lot of opportunity to cut down on the cost of healthcare. If you can innovate using AI and cut down a lot of the man hours that are required, it could also cut down the cost of receiving treatment.
Yes. And do you think
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
go ahead. Do you think the UAE?
No, I was asking, do you think the UAE is in line with the trends that you see in the US, the UK, or is it a step behind? Like, what's the relationship between the startup market in the UAE compared to the US, the UK, which are like, let's say, bigger hubs?
Yeah. I mean, the ambition is there. The frameworks and the mandates are available. The only thing is the only step behind is the regulation point of view,
Okay.
which I know the governments in the UAE are working towards. But in the US, you have the FDA that is globally recognized. And if you get FDA approval as a healthcare startup, you're pretty much set for
You're set.
the rest of the world. And I think the UAE is trying to find something similar where they can have their internal, frameworks and mechanisms to give these approvals. And then the other one is human trials. That's a big one in healthcare. And that's a big one in innovating in healthcare. I mean, it takes 10 years maybe to develop a new technology that involves patients. And human trials are required in order for you to achieve this. But it's getting there, and I'm pretty confident that the UAE will achieve what it's striving for in terms of healthcare. And then fintech will always remain, or still remains, a trend.
Yeah.
Maybe less than before, but it's still there. Prop tech, there's a few trends, especially at net zero carbon emissions. That's a big one. And yeah, from my exposure, I mean, that's what I've seen. But it remains to be the main focus at the moment. That's where the excitement is at.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I think going back to the careers theme, and this is the last question. For a graduate watching us or young professional, what advice, overall career advice, do you have for them from your own experience going through these different industries and the exposure you've got? What would you like to share with them?
I mean, definitely goes back to the advice you gave, which is test and experiment early. It's less risky when you do it in university because you have maybe less responsibilities to worry about. There's always the degree that you're going back to. So the internships will give you a very good indication of the different industries.
Yeah.
And doing them, across fields and as early as possible can give you an exposure of different industries. The second is don't be afraid to fail. I mean, if you fail, or if you don't fail, you don't learn, and you don't get to realize what you like and what you don't like and what works and what doesn't work for you. And even if you fail and you look back at the failures you had, I mean, I'm proud of them because I know in the moment I believed that's the right approach that I'm going for. And I know that I was working towards something that I had a very strong vision of. And even if I failed, I believed in it, and it's okay. I came out with a very important lesson, and I gained very important skill sets.
Yeah.
And be ambitious. I mean, aim high. I mean, the higher you aim, and maybe you fail, but you fail on a very good standard,
Yeah.
Feeling was so high, I failed, but I still gained something out of it. And try to, I mean, I have a 9 to 5, I have a job, but I try to always find something that I can do on the side, a hobby, like which is career talks. Something that you can find passion in, but also monetize. Freelancing, I'm trying new startup ventures, I'm entering new markets. So
Nice.
if you have the time and if you're young and you don't have a family, you don't have kids to feed,
Yes. Yes.
schools to put kids through, it's fine.
Definitely.
The job will pay you to sustain a very good lifestyle, and maybe you can take risks when you have
Yeah.
that.
No, there's definitely, I think that's something that contributes to your overall learning and the value you add to your career, but also to your life overall. If you have something on the side, I don't know, it feels, at least for me, I
Yeah.
really enjoy doing this as well. So
Mhm.
that's honestly a great advice. I want to really thank you for your time, Adnan. It was a very,
Sure.
very insightful conversation.
And I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you,
Yeah,
Simon.
yeah. Thanks a lot. Don't forget to check out this episode. I'll be sharing it on different across all the platforms, LinkedIn,
Amazing.
YouTube.
Okay.
But yeah, really enjoyed talking to you, Adnan. Thank you.
Likewise, Tama. Thank you for having me.